Welcome back to the shop. I'm Andrew and this is Davidson Crafts, and today we're going to turn this into one of these. So about a year ago, I was watching a video by Bobby Duke Arts, and he made one of these wire trees. And it was freaking awesome. I love Bobby's stuff. If you haven't checked it out, definitely check it out. I'll leave a link down in the description. But it inspired me to go ahead and make one of these trees. So this was the first one that I made, and I was super happy with it. And I've made a handful of these kind of wire trees since then, and it's been a lot of fun. They can be a little tedious, especially on the leaves, but in the end, you're left with a really cool project, and I love the way that these look. So let's talk about the tools and material that we're gonna need for this project. First is our wire. Now this is some aluminum wire. I think it's like a 22 gauge. Wire that I just ordered off of Amazon, and I like to use aluminum because it's a lot easier to bend, and so you get a lot less fatigue in your hand when you're doing something like on these leaves over and over and over again. It can definitely tire out the hand, and so using something like aluminum is much easier for that, and it also stays nice and bright over time. So we've got our wire. For our base, what we're going to go ahead and use is this piece of bark here. And I had some leftover resin from a project, and I went ahead and just kind of poured it over this piece of, what is this? Looks like black walnut. Yeah, black walnut bark. And went ahead and just kind of poured it over there. And we'll do some updates to that just to give it kind of a little bit more shape and make it fun. But I think this will be a good base for us to use for this project. As far as the tools, we're going to be using a Tupperware like this, and I'll explain what that's for here in a little bit. And then we're also going to use a drill with a smaller size drill bit. This equals about 3 strands of wire, and so it really doesn't matter as long as it's at least the size of the wire that you're using. And then you're going to need a pair of wire cutters, a pair of pliers, some tape to go around those pliers so that we're not damaging our wire. And then especially for making the leaves, I like to use these round nose pliers. This just doesn't damage the wire as much. And that's it as far as materials and tools that we're going to need for this project. So let's go ahead and dive into it. Okay, for our first step, we're going to go ahead and prep our base. For our base, we're going to be using this Tupperware container. You can really use anything that's just kind of an open vessel that you can set upside down on a flat surface, and it's going to be able to hold our piece in place. What this will do is it will separate our wire roots and help hold our piece in place while we're working on it. So what we're going to go ahead and do is take a drill and drill a bunch of holes here in the center for our wire to go through. So the number of holes that you're going to need really depends on the size of tree that you're going to make. If you're going to make a much larger tree, then you need a lot more holes. If you're going to make a smaller tree, you're going to need a lot less. So for this project, we're not making an overly large tree, so this number of holes should work good for us. So let's go ahead and start preparing our wire. So to prep our wire, we need a bunch of strands that are all about the same length. And so what I found the best way to do that is to take something round, like this jug of vinegar here, and wrap your wire around that, and then you can make one cut all the way through that, and it gives you a bunch of strands that are all the same length. So let's go ahead and get that wrapped. All right, now that we have our wire all wrapped up, we'll go ahead and cut it off from the spool and then slide the whole piece off of our container here and go ahead and make a single cut all the way across it. Okay, with our wire all cut into our same size strands, we can go ahead and start putting it into our base. Now, one thing to think about is the thickness of your wire here all put together. That is going to be the thickest part of your tree. And so if you're wanting a tree that is bigger, you need to add more wire, or if you're wanting a tree that is smaller, you'll need to take some away. But that'll give you a good idea of kind of the size of your tree. Okay, so what we're gonna start doing is taking a couple pieces of wire, Now it really depends on the size of your holes, on how many you can put in each hole. For mine here, it looks like we're going to be able to get 3 pieces of wire in each hole, and I'll start in the center and then just work my way around, adding wire until we've got all of our wire into our base. Okay, now that we've got all the wire in, it's time to go ahead and address our roots. So what we're looking at here is the overall length of the wire that is inside of our container, because that is how much we're going to have for our roots. For me, I like my roots a little bit longer. I like to do kind of crazy root systems and things like that. I think it adds a lot of character to the tree and it makes it a lot of fun. So we're gonna go ahead and push our wire in a little bit further and then just turn it so that our container will still lay nice and flat on our workbench here. Okay, now that everything's all prepped, we're ready to go ahead and start forming our tree. So when I start twisting the wire, I typically use my hands first and then tighten up everything with the pliers as I go along. So to start, what we're gonna do is go ahead and take our base here and just start twisting all of these pieces together. Okay, I'm happy with kind of the initial look here of our trunk. And so what I wanna go ahead and do is start taking sections and separating them from the trunk to then create our branches. The way I like to do that is find areas in which the trunk is then turning and then pull a branch out of that section. I think it makes a much smoother look to the overall tree itself. Now that we've got the beginning of our branch, we'll go ahead and then add an additional fork for this branch. So what we're gonna do is take 4 of these pieces here. Yep. And then twist them into another section of our branch. And then what we'll do is continue to kind of fork these out into individual branches until we leave some space for our leaves. All right, now we've got our first branch completed, and as you can see, what we did was just take a section of wire off of the trunk and begin to wrap that. Once that's all twisted up, we then started to pull out sections of that. And as we did, we went down and down and down until we had sections of just 2 wires. And then we leave this section on the end here for our leaves. Now, another thing to remember about this aluminum wire is it is soft. And so, yes, you can get a nice tight twist to it, but if you over tighten it, it will break on you. And it's not always the end of the world, unless it's kind of the overall end of a branch or something, but you can typically work around that, but just kind of keep that in mind as you're twisting your branches. Okay, we've got all of our branches twisted up, so now we're gonna work on their rough placement, and then we're gonna go ahead and start working on the leaves. Okay, for our leaves, like I said before, we're gonna be using these round nose pliers. They work really well for helping keep our leaves nice and round and not overly damaging the wire. So we'll go ahead and show you a couple on how we do that, and then we'll run a quick montage so you don't have to go through the whole tedious process with me. All right, so we'll take this one here, and then what we'll do is we'll take the pliers, grab the end of it, and then run it around the pliers to create a little loop. Once we've done that, we're gonna make our next loop, and we're gonna do it on top of that previous loop. Right, now the sizes of your loop can vary. I actually think that it gives it a little bit more dimension if they do. For our next loop, we're then gonna go under the previous one. So we do this kind of over-under situation, and it helps give us a nice line for our leaves. So we'll go ahead and work all the way down, just doing over and then under. Then once we get to the end like this, we simply grab our leaves and roll them all together to then create a little clump of leaves. And we start the process all over again. We make a little loop, and then we make another one going over, and then under. And if you end up going over twice, it is not the end of the world. You don't have to undo anything, just keep going. It'll all look fine in the end. And then what I typically like to do, once we've completed our clump of leaves, is I'll then turn them so that they then lay over the top of the branch, like that. Helps in the branch a little bit better and give them a little bit more support. And then I'll also kind of grab these outside edges and just pull them down a little bit so you get a little bit of a domed shape to them. All right, now we only have to do that about 1,000,000 more times. We finally have all of our leaves done. Like I said before, it is quite tedious, but you throw on a good audiobook or listen to some good tunes and it goes by pretty quick. So we were able to get all those finished up, and I think we've got an okay position with most of our leaves and our branches here. So it's time to go ahead and start working on our base in preparation to do our roots. As I showed you before, we're going to be using this piece of black walnut bark that I poured some leftover resin on top of, and I think it's going to make a really nice base for us. It does need to be kind of shaped and trimmed up a little bit, so we'll go ahead and do that in preparation for bringing our tree over and working on our roots. All right, with our base all prepped now, we can go ahead and start working on the roots. For the roots, what we're gonna go ahead and do is actually remove the tree from our little base container here. Sometimes these wires down here can get pretty tangled up, and it can make it kind of difficult to get your tree out. So do your best to try not to tangle up this section. If it happens, it happens. I even had to kind of cut the container off in order to get the tree out sometimes. But most of the time, with a little bit of effort, you're able to pull the tree out. So let's go ahead and get our tree off of this so we can start working on those roots. What we're gonna go ahead and start doing is just separating pieces here as we decide what section of roots is going to go in what way. And I like to kind of already start to overlap them right from the get-go, and I think that this just sets things off in a little bit better way and also helps lock in the twist that we have already done with our trunk. All right, so I think I like the way that those are coming off the tree. So let's go ahead and start twisting them together. Okay, with our roots pretty much twisted all up here, we're ready to go ahead and start trimming them for their final fit to the base. So for that, we're gonna put our tree on the base and then start moving things around so that we can get the roots kind of going into some of these cracks and moving with the overall kind of terrain of our base. And then once they're in place, we can go ahead and clip off the ends in preparation to get them stuck into the base. Okay, we've got the rough position of all of our roots in place. So now what we're gonna go ahead and do is start drilling some holes to put our roots into our piece and secure our tree to our base. I can't stand when I'm watching a YouTube video and they lay out kind of like all the tools. Hey, this is all the tools that you're gonna need for this project. And then you start watching the video and they end up using a bunch of other tools, and they're especially tools that you don't have. And that's really frustrating. With that being said, I am going to be using my a rotary tool to drill these holes, and it wasn't mentioned in the beginning of the video. However, you can use a normal drill for this. The reason I'm using a rotary tool is it's just easier for me to get in there, but it can be done with a drill. I'm just making it easier for myself because I have the tool. So let's go ahead and start drilling in here and getting this tree attached. We've got our roots all attached now. Now, you can decide whether or not you want to go back through and put a little bit of CA glue in each of those holes. Some of these, I think this one on the end, I may put a little CA glue on just because it's a little loose. But most of them are really nice and tight. Our whole tree is being well held on. As we went through and did all the roots, we've kind of mangled the top a little bit. So we're going to go back through and just readjust that, and then we're done. Well, there it is, guys. Our wire tree is all complete, and I'm really happy with how this thing turned out. The process, like I said, especially with the leaves, is a little bit tedious, but it really makes up for it in the roots. I enjoy that process and putting it all together, and as you can see, I went pretty crazy with it, but I like the way that it looks. The overall kind of look of the base with the blue and the greens in it, I think looks really nice and really offsets this bright silver wire, and I'm really happy with how this thing looks. If you like this project, let me know by clicking on the like button, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, be sure to do so for more awesome videos like this. We'll go ahead and end it here with some close-up shots. Thanks so much for watching the video, guys, and we'll see you on the next one. Let's go ahead and get our prayers. We'll go ahead and end it here with some close-up shot. Ow. So let's show you what let me show you what I mean. So let me show you what I mean.